So what could be wrong with this? I mean, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? All of us are creative, all of us use the internet to distribute our content, all of us can become simultaneously creators and audience. It no longer costs anyone anything to distribute their content. Suddenly we are able to all realize our inner creativity. In theory, of course, it's very attractive. In fact, my book was originally called The Great Seduction. My publisher decided that I think they were worried that they could be interpreted as pornography, so they changed it. For some people, of course, it still remains pornography. But this is indeed a great seduction, which I think is why so many people have responded with such hostility, because it's a very attractive notion. It's very seductive. It makes us all feel good about ourselves and about our community. Suddenly, from this closed system, from this so-called elite system, we have an open media, open culture. Everyone is able to realize themselves. But of course, in my view at least, it's a children's story, just like PowerPoint is for kids. It's not true, and that's the essence of my book. It's not true in 2 or 3 main ways. So let me talk a little bit about why I think it's an illusion, why it's a seduction, and why indeed not only is it not true, but it's destructive and dangerous. I have been accused many times of being an elitist, which I'm beginning to like. There are these great moments now in media interviews where I know they're building up. It's like a sexual experience. We're building up to a climax. And I know the question's coming. They're just waiting to pounce on it. They ask all these other questions, and then it gets quiet, and they say to me, "But Mr. Keane, are you an elitist?" And I sort of milk the moment, sexually and otherwise, and I sort of pause and pretend I'm thinking and say, "Yes, I am an elitist." And then, of course, I talk about what in my mind elitism is, which is simply a respect for traditional meritocracy. In my mind, and this may be the subject of a broader next book about elitism and superiority. The very essence of democratic society lies in a complex meritocracy. We don't all start from the same place, of course. I acknowledge that. But that's reality. And the communists tried to create a level playing field, and of course we know what they did. But the reality is, whether or not you start in New York or in the upper west side of New York, or whatever the equivalent upper west side is in Chicago or in Silicon Valley or in Kansas City, the reality is, in my view, is that we live in a relatively complex and reasonably transparent meritocratic world. I think that most people can make it if they choose to. And media, indeed, is one of the more transparent and meritocratic fields, certainly more transparent and meritocratic than the financial arena, more transparent, I think, in some ways than some areas of academia. The fact is that media does not reflect, our media historically, mass media, professional media, does not reflect some sort of class or gender or economic or geographical oligarchy. It's simply not true. And I think that assumption lies behind much of the Web 2.0 idealism. That the traditional media, traditional mainstream media, has been dominated by specific elites. And here we have in a moment to tear the walls down, to liberate media from those elites. In my view, that's not true. In my view, if you're a talented writer or filmmaker, if you play by the rules historically, you can usually get your stuff published. And indeed, traditional media, the ecosystem of traditional media, is made up of professionals who are expert at finding and polishing talent. I'm a good example myself. I wasn't born as a writer. At a certain moment, I guess I transformed myself from an amateur to a professional. I had an idea for the book. I sent that idea out to a group of agents. I was lucky enough to find a very good agent who realized that there was some potential in my project. He completely turned the thing upside down, revised it, made it much more commercially valuable. Then he sold it to an editor. Those editors took the book. I wrote the first drafts. They utterly destroyed those, forced me to write something more commercially viable. And I did that. And in the process, I became a professional. Had I just published this book without having an agent, without having editors, it would have been, whether or not you agree with it, I think it's quite a readable book. It would have been utterly unreadable, utterly indulgent, and I wouldn't be here now. The reality is that the ecosystem of mainstream media, the editors, the fact checkers, the talent scouts, the publishers, these are the crown jewels of mainstream media. And when you in my view at least, when you disintermediate these people, who themselves are a reflection of a relatively open meritocracy, you're doing away with the core value. And most importantly, from my point of view, you're hurting the creative class. Because a writer, a filmmaker, a musician, a journalist, they depend absolutely on that ecosystem. When you do away with that anchor, they're lost at sea. When you do away with that anchor, you have the anarchy of the Web 2.0 world. You have 70 million blogs. You have hundreds of thousands of YouTube videos. You have the anarchy of the web, and you have a user who's utterly bemused, who has no idea of where the quality is and what they should be watching, what they should be reading, what they should be looking at. So that's the first reason why I think that the Web 2.0 is a bad thing. Because I think mainstream media is a good thing. And I think we will regret it deeply if it goes away. I'm